Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Ruby Visions, the talk show on Facebook Live that seeks to bring information and knowledge to the community around uh, things that you may not know or individuals that you may not know but probably need to know something about. As you all know, this began with just really trying to get information to the community that they may not have. The Bible declares that we suffer and perish for the lack of knowledge. And I just want to be able to be a part of the solution in getting the community some knowledge that they may not otherwise have. And over the few weeks that we have been doing this, I hope that you have found some value in tuning in and being a part of what we are trying to bring to you in the way of information and knowledge. Today is no different from what we have done in the past, with the exception of I have on today a longtime friend. I want to say nearly 18 years.
It's been about that.
And he is none other than Sergeant Garen Carter of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. Sergeant Carter and I have, like I said, known each other almost 18 years. I'm thinking almost 18 years. We'll figure it out off camera, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty close to 18 years. Because I had just moved to Kansas City when we met, and I've been here since 1997. I've been here 21 years. So it might be 20 years. But let's get right into this. Sergeant Carter, thank you so very much for agreeing to do this.
Absolutely welcome. Thank you for having me.
I know we had planned to try and do this last week, and we had some complications. I know I had some video difficulties, and you had some things that just kind of popped up. Life happens.
It does. It does.
And so I'm glad that you're here today, and we're going to go into this. Why don't you begin, Sergeant Carter, by just talking a little bit about yourself. Tell us whatever you want us to know about you outside of your work. Just kind of let us know who you are.
Okay. I didn't grow up here in Kansas City. I grew up in Louisiana. Different, but the same in some senses. I lived in New Orleans at some point in high school. We moved. My father died when I was a young kid of cancer, and my mom ended up remarrying in my high school years. Moved to Omaha, Nebraska. That was a bit of a culture shock. From a larger city to a much smaller city, much more diverse city to not so much diverse city, but it was a life learning lesson. It was good. My mom jokingly called me the chameleon. She said I could blend in whatever surrounding you stick me in. I'll eventually watch people enough and blend in that environment, and so I did that. Went on to University of Nebraska. Go Huskers! They're struggling this year, but go Huskers! Went there. My junior year in college, among some other friends, we decided that we were going to take tests for police departments. Now, mind you, when I went to college, my original major was food technology. I was going to help preserve food, create new foods, somewhere along the line, because apparently when you go to college, you change your major several times. I changed mine to business administration and marketing. Kind of cruising along there, and then I ended up being a victim of crime. I was with some friends. We'd gone out, some friends that had graduated high school that I'd graduated with, and some friends that had recently graduated at that moment. Went out for dinner, not doing truly anything wrong. Ended up being the victims of a gang initiation. We got caught in the middle of one. Again, we weren't doing anything wrong. We were attacked by these guys. Through the criminal investigation, it was determined that's what it was when they apprehended these gentlemen. Because of that, I went through all the stages of being scared, being angry, being upset. Started doing work with Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska, and was fascinated by how I could affect people's lives. Never really thought about it up until that moment. That led me into law enforcement, and so fast forward to me talking about applying for tests. So my friends and I decided we're going to go and apply for all these police departments our junior year, and as we said back then, kind of get some experience under our belt, so when we really tested, whatever that meant, we'd be ready. Well, ready came a little bit earlier for me. middle of my junior year, I got an offer to the Missouri Highway Patrol. Tossed the offer around the day that they offered it to me, accepted it, and became a trooper. And that's where many years ago,
Yes, that's how we met.
Darren and I met, Pastor Faulkner and I met. So I was a trooper for about 8.5 years, almost 9 years, and then I lateraled to Kansas City. And so it's been a great journey. I did finish my degree not at University of Nebraska, but at Central Missouri State University. So I still hail Nebraska, but I also hail Central Missouri State University. While I was in the academy, I achieved an associate's degree in police science from Mentor Area College outside of St. Louis. So I'm real big on education, and even now I'm pursuing all kinds of other things to keep myself educated in a variety of things. But that's kind of me in a nutshell. I do a lot. I'm involved in a lot. I believe that if I forget that I was a young man at one point and that I was a young kid and that I grew up in a city with things going on around me and I can't talk to other people about that, then I've lost my way. And so I'm always involved with things that involve kids. I want them to understand that we all kind of went through that struggle. Your struggle may be a little different because you're in 2018 or 2019 as we're going to come into pretty soon. And mine was many years ago. There's still some similarities. And I've got to listen to what's going on in their world to truly understand. And that kind of, to me, encapsulates everything that I do as an officer. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
Well, you know, Sergeant Carter, you talked about that experience you went through with the gang initiation situation, and we've talked about that a couple different times. I can imagine how, you know, frightening that could have been, because as you didn't really go into it here, but you guys' lives were in jeopardy.
Absolutely.
And that was something that said to you, look, I want to go into law enforcement and make sure that other people don't have to experience this. When you were on the highway patrol, what was the area that you served?
When I first got at the academy, I was assigned to Johnson County, Missouri, so Warrensburg.
Okay.
Thus, I ended up going to CMSU. That was my first assignment. It was kind of scary because in the highway patrol, you don't know where you're going to get sent. You get your 3 picks.
In the state?
Yes.
Anywhere in the state?
Yes.
Okay.
You get your 3 picks, not so much cities, but of troop headquarters. So I knew Troop A was Kansas City, Troop C was St. Louis, but Troop A had 13 counties. So I could have been anywhere from,
oh my
I
goodness.
could have been in Warsaw, I could have been up by Smithville,
Right.
I could have been in Kansas City, I could have been wherever. So it worked out for me. My mom at the time had been transferred, and she was the branch manager of the branch office, Social Security branch office in Warrensburg. So for me, it was going to a place where I knew somebody, and so that kind of helped with the transition of getting settled down, and that was great. That was absolutely great.
What is, so both highway patrol, you say trooper and police officer are arms of the law enforcement.
Correct.
What is the biggest difference between a trooper and a law enforcement officer?
The biggest part with a trooper and say a police officer, Kansas City is unique, and I'll explain that in a minute. But being a trooper, you're the state officer. You're an officer, if you will, of the state. So Missouri is a little different. Back in 31 when they were created, Missouri is not just highway patrol. It's the Missouri State Highway Patrol. There was a big fear that they were going to take over from the Sheriff's Association, and so in the Sheriff's departments, that the title is kind of odd, Missouri State Highway Patrol as opposed to Missouri State Police or Highway Patrol.
Right.
So as a result of that, they do a lot. In essence, they're pretty similar to the state police because they have the Criminal Investigation Division, Drug Division, and Crime Control, and then you have the troopers on the road, and those troopers do a variety of things. It's as big as, department-wise, as big as Kansas City, but they're spread out across the state. In Kansas City, obviously, we have our boundaries of the city. Now, because of the, if you will, the days of Pendergast and the Mafia, Kansas City is still under state control. So we're state officers because the governor appoints the Board of Police Commissioners, but yet we're city police officers. So we're a strange kind of being, if you will.
Yes.
But we primarily deal with day-to-day calls. The volume of calls as a Kansas City police officer, that's incredible compared to being a trooper. I think in my almost 9 years of being there, probably my first 6 months of calls with Kansas City equaled that whole almost 9 years.
Oh my God! And see, that's what a lot of people, I don't think, can really understand and grasp. So I'm glad you said that. the work that you guys do in a day on a shift is incredible in terms of the volume of calls that you have to respond to. And Kansas City, you know, make no mistake, is a major city.
It is.
People don't think of it in terms of like a New York or an LA or even a Chicago, but we have as much square miles as any one of those cities and more than New York. I learned that from Mayor Sly James. And so to imagine the kind of volume of calls that you see in a shift is incredible. So what I heard you say is that one of the major differences is the number of calls you get as a highway patrolman versus a law enforcement officer in Kansas City.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting. I was riding with Officer Cooley.
Okay.
And Officer Cooley of the police department is a community person, just one of the best guys you ever want to meet, very down to earth, and very knowledgeable about the city and about the police department. And he was telling me about how the mafia, they believe, had infiltrated the police department, and then the state came in and took it over.
That's correct.
And I think during Mayor Sly James' first term, he applied to get it back.
Yes.
But they denied him.
As of yet, we're still in state control. I know the mayor was wanting to do that. I don't know where all that sits now, but that is correct.
Well, it's interesting that we have this very serious mafia history in Kansas City, not just with their involvement or infiltration with the police department, but just about in everything.
That's true.
In the history of this city. So anyway, that's interesting. We could spend a whole time talking about that, but let's move on because I got some other stuff that I want to ask you about. So you said lateral move from the highway patrol over to the police department, and you were a police officer. What all did you do as a police officer? Because there's patrol, there's traffic, Talk about that a little bit.
When I first came to Kansas City, I went to East Patrol. So I did the lateral process, and they fast-tracked us because they wanted experienced officers. And so we came in. We still went through an accelerated academy. We still had to go through regular break-in. That didn't change for us. We still had the 3-4 months of break-in with the break-in officer. And so that was a bit different because now I have somebody telling me what to do. I didn't say earlier, when I left the highway patrol in lateral, I was a sergeant there.
Oh, so,
so here I am, being in charge of something or somebody's, and now I'm answering to somebody else. So that was a bit different. But I worked at East Patrol, evening shift, PMs as we call it, as a district officer. In East Patrol, boundaries would be about from Prospect to, I'd say about the Independence city limits, from about the river to roughly Cleaver 2, thereabout.
Okay, that's pretty big.
It is a big area. It stretches all the way up. Matter of fact, it borders. At that time, it borders a little bit of Independence, I guess, Raytown, and also touching Lee Summit. So it's kind of a wide area.
Huge area. Yeah.
I did that. I ended up becoming a proactive officer, and what that meant was that instead of always answering calls, being tied to radio all the time, we did. Don't get me wrong, we did answer calls, but we worked on problems. So it may have been that communities complained about we have a lot of crime in this area, or a lot of drug dealing or gang activity. Mm-hmm. They would bring us in. And our job would be to work with the community and find a way to rid that or suppress that, one of the two. Through that, I became a bicycle officer. I rode ATVs for a while. I left there and became a robbery detective, the traffic investigation detective with the traffic enforcement. And my last assignment before getting promoted, I oversaw a mentoring program for African American boys specifically.
Yes, and I don't know if you want to mention what that program was, but Officer Carter and I met, like I said, almost 20 years ago, Sergeant Carter, and when we met, we vowed to keep in touch, but we didn't. Some years passed, and we ran into each other because he came to a meeting that I had, I guess was hosting or had called, and at that time he was working with this program, the OK program.
Right, correct.
And the OK program, OK stands for something.
Our Kids.
Our Kids, which is an African American
right.
boys
Right.
mentoring program.
Mentoring program, correct.
It's a national program.
It's a national program, but it's specifically set within the school district. So I worked in the Hickman Mills School District, Ruskin, Hickman Mills, and Smith Hill. Every once in a while I pick up some kids from elementary school and add it to that, but those are my primary schools.
Okay, and so from that, I was trying to rebirth this organization called the Urban Prevention Coalition, and I knew him from years past, and I knew his involvement in community. I knew his love and passion for helping people, and I said, Officer Carter, would you would you be president of this coalition until we get someone to do it? And I think the until we get somebody is still we're still waiting.
We're still riding that train, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. I love it.
So he became the president of the Urban Prevention Coalition as we were revitalizing that organization. Talk about that just a little bit and your role there and what
The coalition?
Yeah.
One of the things to me about the coalition, I think that is fascinating, is that you're bringing all these entities, if you will, or organizations together to the table for a common cause. We're looking at things. I know currently right now we're looking at a certain area of the city and trying to see how we can bring services that, not so much services that I think or somebody else thinks, but services that folks that live within that area need and want. Sometimes we can say, hey, you're going to take this and shove it down your throat, but that's not what that person needs. That's not what that community needs. That's not what that neighborhood needs. And so that's what we are now, is working with that. We have schools involved. I know, for instance, Center High School, they've come to the meetings and they've been very, very, very much involved. But looking at that in their aspect, looking for safe place for kids. Kids going through a whole lot today, and trauma-informed care, they're dealing with a lot of trauma today.
Yeah.
And how do we deal with those kids? They're there in school, and that might be the safest place they have. I mean, the most consistent place that they have where they get a meal. There's somebody that loves them and cares about them. They may go home and they may not have that. And so we're dealing with those issues right now as far as the Urban Prevention Coalition to see how we can make things better and how we can progress. And I think we're making some headway.
I can tell you that since Sergeant Carter has taken on this role as president of the coalition, there's been a lot of things that have happened. Last spring, we hosted, what was it, at the Southeast?
It was a youth forum. It was
Yeah.
a Speak Out, I think we called it.
Yeah, the Speak Out Youth Forum, where we invited youth and had different workshops, had different organizations there that could offer services and provide their resources and information. And we are now moving towards 2019 with some things. That's just one example of the community involvement of which Sergeant Carter is involved. And some would say, well, how are you able to do that and work a full-time law enforcement officer position and sleep and family and eat? How are you able to do all that you do?
God. I mean, I'll put it bluntly, it's God. You have to have faith, and if you truly, truly believe in God, He'll give you the power. He'll empower you to do those things. And so that's my answer to that is God. God allows me to do that. One thing I didn't say earlier was one of the things, having gone through that, the thing, I guess, incident, if you will, the gang initiation, was one of the things I said to myself when I was at Boys Town, when I went to Boys Town, was that if I can do anything to prevent someone from ever having to go through what I went through, it's well worth it. And that doesn't mean be a vigilante. That's not at all what it means. But it means if I can truly affect somebody's life and be a part of somebody's life, to do that. When I went to Boys Town, I was volunteering. Boys Town ended up hiring me because of how effective I was with the kids. And it was just me being me.
Yeah.
I didn't go there being phony. I was me.
Yeah.
I didn't mind talking to the kids about my experiences because I wanted those young kids, they were there for a reason, to know your actions affect other people. And this is how it's affected me. Somebody else, it wasn't the same kids, but somebody else, this is how it affected me. And so that's kind of been a driving force behind a lot of things that I do, even today.
Yeah. Well, I can say when you and I met, I don't know, it was like we clicked. It was Darren and Garen and Darren. And I was messing with Margot the other day Margot is Director of Prevention Services at First Call, who is the sponsor organization for the Urban Prevention Coalition, as well as other coalitions in the area. And I called you and I said, it's Garen and Darren, the dynamic duo. And she laughed until her face turned red. I called us the dynamic duo because really we have partnered not just on this, but on some other things. And like I said, we've been friends through almost 20 years.
Correct.
One of the things that I really like about you wearing the uniform is that you're a person of faith. And I don't know a better person that I want wearing the badge than someone who's grounded and rooted in their faith.
Thank you.
And that speaks volumes for who you are. And that's one of the reasons why I think we connected
I agree.
all those years ago.
I agree.
And now you wear the gold brass,
That's correct.
not the silver brass.
That's correct.
Talk to us about your role now as a supervisor for the Kansas City Police Department.
It's a wonderful thing. Took a lot of work to get it. Don't get me wrong. But the role is different. As far as the public's concerned, I'm still that policeman. And I will always be. I believe treat people the way I want to be treated. But as a supervisor, I have to see things from a different lens. Not so much worry about the individual, me, but I've now got to worry about all the folks that work for me. I want to make sure that a couple of things, well, several things, not a couple. One, that they treat people right. Two, that they do the right thing. Three, that they go home to their families every night. And
that last one is huge.
it is. It's huge. And I want to make sure that their well-being is okay.
Yeah.
And I tell my guys at night, we go, matter of fact, we have roll call, I'll say to them, hey, I want you to come to work, have fun, be safe, treat people right, and, if you need a break, I need you to take a break. Because when people call us, I'd say 95% of the time, it's not for anything good. And so sometimes we see the worst of the worst of people and in people, or we're called when the worst thing's going on in your life, and it may mean minutes that I've got to figure out how to sort this out and how to bring some kind of neutrality to chaos.
Right now.
A lot of times.
Right
Yes.
now.
And so I tell my officers, I said, I need you, if it becomes too much for you, something becomes too much, I need you to let me know that. Because there's a ripple effect that takes place. We see a lot of bad stuff, and some folks do this job and they can't do it anymore. And so to me, that's where faith comes in, because you got to have a lot of faith. When you're seeing all the worst of the worst, you've got to have a lot of faith to carry you through this. And you've got to be spiritual somewhere along the way, because we don't see all the good. But to still be able to go there, like for instance, I'm a crisis intervention officer. I'm a CIT officer.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm the CIT coordinator for South Patrol Division, and we'll go to things where we walk into somebody's house, and I didn't know for the last 10 years you've been dealing with someone with a mental health issue, and they've been doing all kinds of things that no one can explain. They can't even explain.
Yeah.
But yet I still go in and I treat them with soft hands. And we figure out, what do we need to do? How can we get you some help? And we start making referrals or start making phone calls. Let's get you somewhere so you can be evaluated. And it was amazing. We had an incident the other night. Had a gentleman that was out in the middle of the street with a machete. That's the call we had. We get there. He's saying that these folks have followed him, truly hallucinating, because he's telling us that they're standing over there. There's nobody standing there. He said there are two people by this tree. There's nobody there. And then he asked me, and I'll commend my officers, first of all. When I got there, he'd already put the sword down. He was sitting in handcuffs. He was sitting on the front porch. They were having a normal conversation.
Yeah.
That could have ended bad.
Yes.
It could have. We see all the stories and hear all the things. That could have ended bad. Yes, it was a young black man. The two officers that went, one was Hispanic and one was black. But as we got there, and I talked to him, he asked me. He says, "Do you believe that I see these folks?" And I said, "Well, that's not what's important right now." I said, "What I want to know is," I said, "maybe if he's me, is, do you want help? How can we help you?" And we had a conversation and talked, because I think if this was my family member, I'd want somebody to take a moment just to kind of sort this stuff out. I understand it's chaotic. I understand it's difficult. And even after that, we got the guy help. And I talked to my officers afterwards and said, you guys okay? What are you thinking? That's important to me as a sergeant. So a different lens, completely different lens.
30 minutes goes by so fast.
It does.
We have just a few minutes left, like 5 minutes left. I don't know if it would be possible for you to come back
Absolutely.
another time and continue this conversation, because there's a lot we have not gotten to talk about. One of those things is your role as a CIT officer.
That's correct.
Because when you go on a call, not every call you go on is a law enforcement call in nature.
That's correct.
Some of it is mental health.
That's correct.
And mental health, I'm also including substance abuse, alcohol and drug related, where people are doing things that could be criminal.
Absolutely.
But they're doing those things that are criminal based on another problem. They have mental health issues, or they are under the influence.
That's right.
And so having a CIT officer to arrive that's been trained, especially another form of specialized training that you all get, is another conversation that I'd like to have.
Absolutely.
Because I know that the public is not fully aware. There's been some push with information getting out, and Gina English, one of the social workers with the police department, has done a fantastic job of getting information out, and others like her around. You can call 911, but ask for a CIT officer.
That's absolutely correct.
Because it may not be of a law enforcement nature necessarily. And so I want to, if we can,
absolutely,
maybe schedule another time for you to come back and talk about that, as well as some other things that we're obviously not going to get to today. But I do have one more question for you before we wrap up today, and that is, as of today's Saturday.
Yes.
We had 97 or 98 homicides for the year. This time last year, we were, I think, at 114, 115 for the year. We're under where we were last year, but last year was a really high,
unfortunately,
homicide rate. What's the answer? How do we reduce homicides in Kansas City?
I don't think it's a one answer. My personal belief is this: we have to look at this in a holistic approach. The community has to be involved. We as police, we will never arrest our way out of this. It'll never happen. I don't care how many folks we arrest, it'll never happen. We have a role, obviously, yes, but the folks that are getting killed, the majority know their assailant. In most cases, there's some folks, whether it's intimate, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, friend, cousin, there's a tie somewhere. And so I think it's gonna take a whole lot of folks being involved, and everybody's got to come to the table. And I think when we get past the moment of finger pointing and start working together, I think then we'll find some success.
That's huge. Well, again, that's something that I'd like to explore with you even further.
Absolutely.
In perhaps another segment. And the people on Facebook who will view this, those who are viewing it now live and those who will view it as a replay, will have the opportunity, and this is for you all, you'll have the opportunity to leave some comments in terms of what you thought was really helpful in this interview, what you would like us to really try and tackle in a second interview, because you all have heard Sergeant Carter has agreed to come back for a second time. But in your comments, please leave any questions you'd like us to try and address. Leave any comments that you'd like us to read and think about as we think about having another segment with you as a sergeant of the Kansas City Police Department.
Thank you. Absolutely.
This is amazing to have you sitting on my couch. We've been friends. Have you been to my house before?
No, I haven't.
This is the first time in 20 years.
All these years.
That's ridiculous. Now we got to do better than that.
We must.
We got to do better than that, because we have sons that are around the same age.
Yes, we do.
And
we
everything.
Do.
So we've got to do better at that, and I think we will. But it has been absolutely my pleasure, Sergeant Carter, my friend, to have this opportunity to speak with you and talk to you about some things, and for the community who doesn't know you, because everybody in Kansas City knows Sergeant Carter, because he's so involved, and that's the way he wants to be, visible in the community. We could talk more, and maybe we will have the opportunity next time to talk about how do we improve relationships between community and law
I'd
enforcement.
love to have that conversation.
Because you're out there every day trying to do just that. And so we'll make sure that to schedule you for another time and tackle those three issues. We'll go back into how do we reduce violent crime in Kansas City, homicide specifically. We'll talk maybe more about the CIT officer and your role in that. And then we'll just talk about how to improve community relations. So we'll try to plan something for that to happen in the very near future.
Fantastic.
We are now out of time. I want to thank you all who have tuned in to another edition of Ruby Visions Facebook Live talk show. Special thank you to my guest,
Thank you, my friend.
Sergeant Garen Carter of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. Remember, if you have questions or comments that you'd like for us to tackle, Sergeant Carter has agreed to come back on the show, and we will have him back and address those questions or comments that you post. Until then, we thank you, and we hope that some information you received is going to be helpful and knowledgeable for you in your day-to-day life. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, God bless you.